Have you ever realized why do we often have conflicts? Or have you sometimes wondered why is it that you try to say something, but the other person misinterprets or misreads your message? Or maybe sometimes you say things with a lot of passion, yet it fails to deliver the kind of result you're expecting. Well, the reason for that is often we make a mistake in terms of paralanguage. Now, what is paralanguage? Paralanguage is an essential part of communication, yet one of the most underestimated parts of communication. So when we talk of paralanguage, there are different elements that we need to consider. I'm going to talk to you about 5 of these elements that you can remember and consciously adopt in your communication every single time to ensure that your message reaches correctly and effectively. So what are we going to talk about? Number 1, we're going to talk about emphasis, stress on the right words. Number 2, we're going to talk about tonality. Number 3, we will talk about volume. Number 4, speed. And last but not the least, we will also talk about pause. So let's understand each of this in further depth. The first one is emphasis, also called as stress on the right words. Many a times when we communicate, we fail to emphasize on the right word at the right time. For example, if you have to say that this is an important meeting for you. Now, if you generally say it, this is how it sounds. This is an important meeting. But if you say this is an important meeting, those are two separate things, aren't they? So the fact is, when you emphasize on the right word at the right time, it changes the entire complexion of the statements that you make. So emphasize on the right word in each sentence so that the receiver of your message understands exactly what you're trying to say. Then comes tonality. It is said that 90% of our conflicts or misunderstandings happen because of wrong tonality. Now, tonality is easier said than done, but the fact is we need to be conscious of what our tonality sounds like, especially from the other person's perspective. So for example, let's say you are in a meeting and you disagree with one of your colleagues, and this is what you say. Excuse me, but I disagree with what you said. Did you hear that? That sounds very rude, isn't it? Almost humiliating or insulting to the other person. Chances are this one sentence will trigger hatred, animosity, or perhaps many other things. So a better way of putting this across might be, excuse me, but I don't agree with what you said. I think there is a better way of doing it. So even now you're disagreeing, but the tonality with which you say that is completely different. So remember this, tonality plays a key role in how you share your message, and most importantly, how the other person interprets your message. But is tonality sufficient by itself? There are other factors to consider. And therefore, the third element that you need to look for is volume. So have you been in briefings, discussions, meetings where you were struggling to understand what exactly is the other person saying because you couldn't hear him or her properly? Many people do not speak at a volume which is easily understood by the other person. And therefore, you got to make sure that your volume is high enough for the other person to understand your message. For example, if you're conducting a session for your colleagues or you're in a briefing addressing your team members, then you've got to make sure that the volume at which you speak is easily catchable for all of them. On the contrary, there are many people who speak at a higher volume, causing a lot of disruption. Excuse me, I would like to share something. Not necessarily all the times. I'm sorry if I intimidated you. So the fact is, volume has to be maintained at balanced levels, neither too high nor too low. And especially when you're conducting conference calls or when you're talking to someone over the phone, make sure your volume is well received by the other person. Next comes the pace. A lot of people tend to believe that if they speak faster and faster and faster, then they'll be very, very influential, and therefore they'll kind of interrupts the entire flow, isn't it? Unfortunately, many people tend to believe that if you speak fast, you're fluent in the language, which is not true. Fluency has nothing to do with pace. Pace is important because it allows you to deliver your message at a speed which is understood and interpreted by the other people without any kind of effort on their part. So when you speak to people, make sure that your pace is even. It is neither too fast nor too slow. Just like volume shouldn't be too high or too low, similarly, pace should neither be too fast nor be too slow. You also got to understand cultural nuances here. So let's say if you're talking to a person from another country, then you might want to readjust your pace accordingly. Perhaps a bit slower would be a good idea so that the other person can hang on to every word, every phrase that you're sharing. So remember the pace the next time. And last but not the least, you also got to be aware that at times it's good to just take a pause. You don't have to speak consistently and on and on and on. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why a lot of people end up using fillers. What I wanted to say is all these sounds come in because you're trying to one, speak faster, and you're not taking adequate pauses. Pause is not only important because you want to avoid fillers, but it will also help you grab the attention of the other person. So if you're delivering an important presentation to a client or perhaps to your top management, you might want to consider taking a pause. For that matter, in any speech, in any conversation, in any communication that you are about to start, make sure you think about where do I pause. That's going to have a great impact on your delivery. So here are the 5 essential elements of paralanguage again. We started by understanding emphasis, emphasize on the right word at the right time. Number 2, we spoke about tonality. The right tone is perhaps the pleasant one. Try to connect, don't insult or humiliate. Number 3 is the volume, neither too high nor too low. Then we spoke about pace. Pace has to be even, neither too fast nor too slow. And last but not the least, we spoke about the importance of pause. Now, if you use a mix of all these things every time you communicate and be conscious about it, I can guarantee you people will love to hear what you are trying to tell them. So use this the next time whenever you are delivering an important talk, or perhaps you're in a meeting, or for that matter, anywhere and everywhere. And do let me know, how was your experience with adopting the right paralanguage? Thank you so much.